So the usage, the use areas. What
So
else do you?
typically, you're going to look at use areas and you're going to use the customer segments.
Yeah, customer segment. So give us some examples of how you go about segmenting the customers.
So one example of the segmenting was with the dog balls, different breeds of dogs.
I see. Okay.
So what you're doing is you're saying, how can we define, um, the audience, because again, if you're buying a dog ball, you presumably own a dog. And so the question is, does that type of dog make a difference? And how does that change the way we're presenting the page?
So David, have you ever tried like asking point blank, give me the customer avatar based on these reviews that for my product?
Yes, and you get okay results, but the secret really is at the top and the bottom, okay? Because the difference between the top and the bottom is dramatic, and so what you end up is getting, it's like, you can't be half pregnant. You're pregnant or you're not, okay? And so by isolating them and separating them, that's when you really get the information you need. We're not looking at the average. Average doesn't help us. We're looking at who are the satisfied customers. How can we get more of them? Who are dissatisfied? How can we deal with them? Either, recommending something else, or, because, one thing that's really clear about Amazon, and I have a number of clients that have, return rates of 20%. You can't run a profitable business with 20% conversions, with 20% returns. And
No.
so you want to sell to the people who are going to get the most value from your product.
Okay. So really, you're creating two avatars almost, where satisfied customer avatar, what they look like,
Yes.
and dissatisfied customer avatar, and then one of my favorite sayings is accentuate the positive,
Mm-hmm.
eliminate the negative. So you are gonna do exactly that with the pictures and the infographics and okay. So that's a very I mean, this is what you call a data-driven approach, right? So,
Exactly. And we found that the brands that we partner with, they're seeing increased conversion rates of 10 to 20%. Because again, we're simply listening to the customer. This is not rocket science. The customer is telling us what to do. We are interpreting what they say, and we are testing it on the page and validating whether, our hypothesis of this qualitative data is actually results in improved conversion.
okay, because I mean, frankly, at the beginning of the conversation, uh, when I introduced the subject, I was expecting, especially after you mentioned Excel sheets or
Mm-hmm.
data,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like thinking, okay, we're gonna load up the conversion rates and blah blah blah, but did nothing to do with that. You're not
Nothing.
looking at those numbers.
No.
Okay,
No.
it's all about what the reviews are telling.
What's the customer telling us? Yes.
Yeah. So how much is enough? In other words, if you have three reviews, that's not gonna do much. So what is the threshold in order to get the most out of this approach?
Um, I would say 3 to 500. Okay, so but you need a fairly large number of reviews to be having 3 to 500. And the thing that's sort of interesting, and I don't quite understand why, but Helium 10 is not able to access all of the reviews. Typically, they're only getting about 60% of the written reviews that Amazon has. And I'm not sure if that's an expense thing with Helium 10 or it's a limitation that Amazon imposes. But um, so if
Okay.
you if you had 1,000 written reviews, you probably would only have access to about 600 through Helium 10.
Okay. And if somebody has 300 reviews, Helium 10 will give you all
Probably
300 or
200.
200. Okay. So, okay, what options are available for those who don't have that number of reviews?
Well, if you have at least, if you have 100 reviews, you can draw some basic conclusions to test. Okay. If you don't, it's going to be difficult. Again, the more reviews that you have, the easier it is to segment, because you now have, larger groups of subgroups. So, if you have fewer than 100 written reviews, you're not going to get enough data to really be able to get a good sense. But the more reviews you have, the more data you have, the more you can really hone in on it, and the more segmented you can get. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't draw some basic conclusions and test it. But again, it's now actually there's another alternative, and that is go to your competitor. Take their reviews, look at their reviews, and see what their customers are saying. And say, hey, I'm selling the same thing they are. I'm also selling a dog ball. They have, 20,000 reviews. I have 100. Well, what are they saying? And how do I put that on my page?
Okay. So that's the smartest way to do it. If you don't have enough, especially if you're just launching it.
Correct.
And in fact, this is something you can do before you launch. You
Absolutely.
and then you simply ask, give me the best position for me to compete with this listing, right?
Correct. So, and again, a lot of it depends upon where the life cycle of the product is. Okay. And so if you have a more mature product, okay, then you want to say, okay, how can we leverage what we have already? If you have a product where competition is the key, okay, so for example, you were talking about, the Chinese invasion. Well, then you can perform the same exercise, but just using the competitors instead of you, and say, well, how are the difference between what we're seeing with their reviews and what they're seeing with my reviews? And is it a different customer, or is it the same customer? So yes, you doing it from a competitive standpoint is a really useful way of doing it as well.